Hello and welcome to this edition of Salima Speaks. Today on my show, I have a wonderful man here. His name is Reverend Jesse Brown, and we're going to talk to him about so many different things. Hello, Reverend Brown.
Hi, Salima.
How are you?
I am enjoying being on your show.
And thank you, finally, for
I
coming on my
we've
show.
talked about it a number of times.
Exactly.
I'm finally here.
Exactly. Because you have your own show. What is your show?
Oh, mine is focused on fitness.
Okay.
And of course, I understand it comes on at 6 o'clock on Sundays and 10 a.m. on Fridays.
And tell me a little bit about your show.
Well, we focus on nutrition, but we focus on the three basic things that we think people need to know. Inform yourself, good nutrition, and exercise.
Right.
And so the show is a 30-minute show divided up into those three segments, and we usually give some examples so that people can have something that they might be able to relate to and incorporate in their lives.
Great. And I just lost 20 pounds.
I heard.
Weight loss.
Fantastic. Keep going.
And I feel good about it.
All right.
And so I understand that you are a reverend. Let me ask you this. Do you think that people are called to the ministry, or can just anybody say, I want to be a reverend, I want to be a preacher, or what? Do you think you were called to it?
Well, I was definitely called to do ministry. Matter of fact, if I had my way, I probably would have done science, astronomer or something like that. That's what I was really leaning toward.
Okay.
But somewhere along the way, and I knew it was literally as early as 6th grade, I knew that was the science was good and I enjoy it and I get to do it as a hobby now, but that my charge was to help transform the lives of people, but even more than that, help transform the place, this earth that I live on. And I know that couldn't be done on my own, and it was going to take something far more powerful than I ever had.
So what did you get a spark, or hello, Reverend Brown, you're going to be a preacher, or what did you know? What made you know this is what you're supposed to do?
You figure it out by seeing how your gifts and talents are being used.
Okay.
People would listen to me. I was preaching when I was 12 years old in my church.
Okay.
I was the youth minister many times whenever we occasionally had the youth to run the service.
Okay.
And so I usually got designated as the preacher for the day. So I would sit with the pastor and I would figure out weeks in advance what the sermon was going to be. And they tended to be a little short, but it was a 12-year-old mind. But as time went on, I found ways in which to spark an initiative in people and use that spark to talk about how they could live better, how they could live their lives, how we all ought to be living, and what is required of us to be happy.
You know, that's my big thing, happiness. So many people are not happy. They go to a job that they hate. They're with a mate that they hate. You know, they live in a house that they hate. They have children that they hate. Well, you can't throw them away. You can't when they get a certain age. But you know what I'm saying? A lot of people, they don't think happiness is important. To me, happiness is everything.
Well, I think we ought to live to be happy.
Exactly.
And live to be healthy.
Right.
And to me, one of them, they go the same. If you're not healthy, you're less likely to be happy.
Exactly.
And I also don't want anything to hold me back. I want to be able to do anything that my mind can conceive of and God will send me to go do.
All right.
I want to be ready to go do it at any point in time. So I work hard at trying to physically and mentally, emotionally, and spiritually stay fit as I possibly can. It doesn't mean that you're perfect now.
Right.
Let's be real here.
Okay.
You know, there's a lot of things that don't work out right and stuff messes up.
Right.
But you learn how to recover. You get knocked down, you get up.
Right.
You assess your situation, you determine where you need to go and how you need to get there, and then you make it happen.
Exactly.
None of those things are easy, so for us to talk about it so glibly is not necessarily reflective of the hard work it takes sometimes.
And you know, I'm glad you said fitness, because it seems like, I don't know why, but like you see the church ladies, they're big and they have little quilt over shoes because they're so big and fat, and Christianity and Islam is like, when they're really spiritual, it seems like they're fat. You know, you don't have to be fat to love God. You should love yourself and love God through being healthy.
Well, I think we've got a number of mixed messages that are going on. That is a message of society, and in some cases, the expectations in our culture that is really not healthy. at all.
Right.
We are a consumer generation, but should we actually be consuming, or we ought to be figuring out how to balance our lives?
Exactly.
I mean, it's really the balance issue, not the consumption issue.
Right.
Take only what you need and leave the rest alone,
right.
so that someone else can have it.
Exactly.
If we did that, most of us would only eat about half of the portions that we eat in the first place,
exactly.
if not a little less, because we simply don't need all of those kinds of things.
And you know what? I found that out through this accurate weight loss thing that I'm on. I found out that I don't need as much food as I thought I needed, but it wasn't that I needed the food, it's that I like the way food tastes.
Sure, well.
And the thing is, I still like the way food tastes, but what I learned was portion control.
Sure.
Okay?
And of course, this show is not really dedicated to this, but you know, we have emotional responses to life itself.
Exactly.
And some of that emotional response gets tied up into food and what we eat and how much we eat and all of that. And those things need to be assessed by individuals. But if you take that seriously into your life, then you can be fit throughout your whole life.
Right.
There's only been one time in my life that I was what I would call overweight, even though no one else saw it. I was 204 pounds.
Okay.
And the reason why I immediately decided to do something about it, because it also affected my blood pressure.
Right.
But as soon as all of that was brought back down, everything went into check. So,
wow.
you know, don't worry much about the blood pressure stuff at all. And I take mine probably far more than most people do, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, just to see where I am on things like that. And I stay well within the range of what I need to be doing. But it's more than just that. It's a lifestyle. If you want to be happy and healthy,
exactly,
it's a lifestyle.
And if you love God, you know,
and if you
loving
love God
is loving yourself. And if you're gorging on food and you're unhealthy and you're sick and everything, you're not going to love God. You're not going to have a good relationship with God because you don't have a good relationship with yourself.
Wow.
But I want to talk to you about something else. And of course, you're going to be back on my show. But you have opened my eyes to this tragedy.
Yes.
Tragedy. And it's called the tragedy of Ebenezer Creek. And as a matter of fact, we're going to be working on that together. Tell me a little bit about that, please.
Well, I was invited to come down to Raccoon, Georgia, just outside of Savannah.
Raccoon?
Raccoon,
okay.
Just outside of Savannah, and to that were newly discovered grave sites.
Okay.
About 250 of them, little ground penetrating radar kind of pinpointed where they were. And by virtue of the fact that it was outside the physical compounds of the church cemetery there, they were thought to be slave graves.
Wow. Okay.
That is still, in my opinion, yet to be verified, because we need to do some forensics work and we need to do some more scientific work. But be that as it may, we're not there yet on that end of it. I was trying to determine why these people were there. Right. In other words, why were they buried there? Were they members of the church, or, you know, what happened? One of the big events, and this goes back to 1864, Civil War. This is how old this grave site is. It's actually older than that, but this goes back to that period of time. In 1864, not very far away from there, there's an incident called Ebenezer Creek. Okay. General Sherman was marching through Georgia and fighting the war to keep Georgia in the Union.
Okay.
And he had a couple of commanders that was there, one of them being a commander, Major General Jefferson. Okay. And this Jefferson, not the Confederate Jefferson, but on the Union side, this Jefferson was in charge of a small corps of folks, and he was marching with the army. The total army was about 62,000 men going through. And so they went to Atlanta, and they took care of Atlanta, and they ended up burning Atlanta, literally burning Atlanta down. One of the things you did in war back then is you made sure that your enemy had nothing that they could come back to. So they did things like burn the city down.
Now, it's called, I just saw it, honestly, yesterday.
Yeah.
It's called Sherman's March or something?
Sherman's March to the Sea.
Okay.
Because all of this took place, and I'm trying to lay the context down here for us, so it sounds a little long.
We'll have a half an hour show.
Okay. He was headed to the sea to replenish supplies and that kind of thing. Right. But in doing so, he also was taking a gamble. And the gamble was that he could get his 62-person army, feed them, clothe them, do all the things you have to do with an army, and get down there without any support lines. Because once he left Atlanta, he no longer had the support. So he had to go all the way. There was no return. So he felt that he could do that with his army, and Ulysses S. Grant gave him permission to go for it and do it, and that's exactly what he did. In that process, one of his commanders needed to get the wagons through, and what they did is they got some of the black labor, some of the African slaves who were able to clear the roads so that their heavy wagons could go through. By the way, they were also at the same time pilfering the area. And this again was part of the necessity of war. They were allowed to go and take the crops and food sources, that's chickens and goats and whatever, for the service of the army. So while they were coming, they were doing that. Well, when they got down to Ebenezer towards Savannah area, you're almost at the sea. You're within around 25 miles of where they were trying to get to. But down there it's called the Pine Barrens, and there's not a lot of food down there. But also by then, they had liberated there were lots of slaves who had been liberated from their plantation owners. And so they were following the army.
These were the good guys. These were they were
That's
fighting
right.
for the slaves.
That's correct. This is the North, and they were coming in. So the slaves started following the army. But Major Davis just had a hot temper. He didn't like that at all.
Wow. He didn't like the slaves following
he liked it as long as they cleared the roads for him. As long as the men cleared the roads, it was fine. But he could not figure out, he did not want those folks following him any longer because they slowed the army down. That's basically his take on this.
And men, women, and children?
Yeah, it was men, women, and children. So and now I have to go on the accounts of what has been written mostly by some of the military that were there at the time out of these accounts. But basically what happened was the stream itself became swollen from rain, and so it was overdone. But they decided to build pontoon bridges so that they could get the animals across. But what they did was they tricked the slaves. They told them, look, we need to protect you from the rear. Even though they know the Confederate army was coming from the rear. So we're going to let the Union soldiers go across first. And so that's exactly what they did. They let the Union soldiers go across from the first. But before any of the slaves could go across, they then cut the pontoon bridges so that they could not cross. And because the river was 10 feet higher than it normally is and 165 feet wide at that particular point, and I know the river is not that big because I've actually seen the spot where it's at. It's much smaller than that, but because it was swollen, the river was swollen, the Confederate army comes up behind all of those slaves and began with their cavalry to push them into the water. And by one general's account, 5,000 men, women, and children. And for those who turned around of the slaves who tried to fight them, they either shot them or slashed them, as the words go.
So General Davis led them to their death.
He betrayed them.
Well,
even though they had worked for him and cleared the road for his army to get through to that point.
So why am I just hearing about this?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't actually have an answer for you because even getting the accounts of this story, there are several things that struck me as I've been doing some research. One, the most we get is a tragedy, even though it was a massacre.
Exactly.
Number two, the military did not believe the reports when they were reported about the deaths and thought that it didn't happen. So there's some denial going on there, or cover-up, depending on how you want to read the story in any particular way. And two, history is written by the victors, not by the losers. So
you don't know.
You don't know. And in this particular case, the slaves were not loved by neither Confederates or the Northern Army. As a matter of fact, Davis was not there to free the slaves. He was there to protect federal rights.
So we can't get no love, man. Come on.
No love
at all.
The
people who were fighting for us didn't love us.
That's correct.
So,
so I think that some of those people could have been buried in this gravesite from that massacre, and that's what I'm hoping to do the research on.
And I want to follow up because I want to actually help you, do some of that. We talked about that, but also what I found interesting. The founder of Howard University.
Yeah, he's one of the generals that was on the scene at the time of the tragedy.
I actually thought Howard University was founded by a black man. I think most people do.
Yeah.
But maybe
no, it's a black general. Not a black general. It's a general, a white general of the Northern Army.
So
he was there at the time when that happened.
So maybe he found a black school because he felt a little bit guilty.
Well, I don't know his motive for doing that, but it appears that in the record he was certainly not supporting what General Davis did to the slaves. That seemed to be fairly clear in the records.
Well, it seems like what I saw yesterday, and watch it, guys, if you honestly, Sherman's March is on the internet.
Right, Sherman's March is on, I think it's on History Channel 2.
History Channel, exactly. I saw it yesterday. It was unbelievable. But as we were talking before, the account that they showed, they glossed it over.
Oh yeah, it's very weak. It actually doesn't. It never mentions that it was even a tragedy in the History Channel show. Wow. It says it was it sounded like a bad accident.
Exactly.
That's what it kind of gave you the feel of.
It almost gave you the impression that now the Army got over because they were smart and they could swim and all this stuff. And then here come the lonely little slaves, yassa, and they couldn't swim. But they were actually forced into the river, into their
That's
death.
correct.
Okay? So it wasn't like they just couldn't swim or anything. They actually dismantled the bridge so that they couldn't cross.
That's correct. That was deliberate. And to me, the definition of a massacre is when human beings deliberately set up and or kill other human beings. That's the general. Even in their day, that would have been a massacre.
Exactly.
Even in the Civil War, that would not have been looked upon favorably. And I don't know where this story is going to lead. I'm just going to follow what the science tells us. Maybe if we are able to exhume some of the bodies, we will determine how they died. Maybe. Maybe we'll find out if how many of these are African slaves. There's also, when you're doing this kind of work, you keep an open mind. There could have been Confederate soldiers buried there. There could have been Northern soldiers buried there. There are other people who died there or died in the area there. They could have been members of the church.
Why is this so important?
Well, of course, it's important to get the history of what really happened correct.
Right.
Because some people tell the story.
I told I was doing this. Why don't you let that go? That happened back then. That's not happening now. Everybody's trying to dig up slavery. But they're always saying, forget slavery, but remember the Holocaust.
Yeah. Or remember all other events. It's actually a mindset. If we actually take this into a larger context, it's a mindset that some people don't value.
Right.
And in my opinion, we're looking at that same kind of mindset today when we look at the immigration issue.
Exactly.
When we look at how we're treating various populations in this war on terrorism, where we deliberately pick and choose who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. And we forget that, Timothy McVeigh was a white guy who blew up the building, yet we don't even look for homegrown terrorists who look like somebody else.
Because as soon as we hear a bomb, all them Arabs, they had to do it. The building fell down 22nd and Market. Immediately, people see on the internet, those Arabs, they're at it again. Come on, you know?
So I'm always interested in seeing that justice gets done. I also think there's a greater responsibility. As African Americans, I think we owe it to our ancestors, especially those who were not able to tell their story in their lifetime, that if we have the chance to do that we tell the story. I don't care where the story goes. I don't care if it's politically correct or politically incorrect. That's not my issue. My issue is to make sure that the story gets told as truthfully as we can tell it. And I think we owe it to our ancestors. And if something happens and somebody else after me has to tell my story, I sure hope that they take the opportunity to get it right and do the research and do whatever is required of them to tell the story. So I feel an obligation to make sure that we tell our history and begin to take charge of telling our story. That's important. It also ought to be a lesson for us. I mean, history does repeat itself. This is not the only tragedy. We've seen so many tragedies and massacres literally throughout the world, in African countries and in non-African countries.
Exactly.
We got stuff going on everywhere. That ought to be a lesson to us.
Do you
that's
think
hard for us to get to.
That prayer works for everything, Reverend?
Of course, prayer works for everything, but that's not the point of prayer alone.
Okay.
Prayer simply gets you ready to go do the work.
Ooh.
You got to get up off your knees after you finish praying.
Wow.
Prayer fortifies you. It cleanses you.
Right.
It gives you focus, and that's what prayer does. It is not that you pray and then you sit down.
Okay.
When you're in prayer, you're ready to get up.
Okay.
That's why we tell people to pray and fast.
Okay.
It's not to get you weak; it's to get you strong.
Right.
That's important to do, absolutely. But and prayer, or things like prayer, we use prayer in the Christian world, we use it in the Muslim world, and those kinds of things. But there are other ways to also fortify yourselves that come through other religious denominations, and some use what they call meditation, and others use other kinds of things. But it's all for the same purpose: get ready, get up, get it done.
Exactly.
So yes, prayer is absolutely important, but it is not the end. It's simply a beginning or part of the moving along in the process.
Now, if somebody wouldn't have come and hear you, I heard a little bit of that preacher stuff going, I'm going to come to one of your sermons, where could they go to see you?
Well, I actually am preaching around a number of places. I think I'll be at on Ryan Street, Saints United Lutheran Church this coming Sunday. I just put it out on my Facebook because you had asked me about it a few days ago.
Right. And what's your Facebook?
Jesse Brown, or Images by Jesse Brown.
Oh, yes, because those unbelievable pictures, you take really unbelievable photographs.
Well, that's fun stuff for me. That's playtime.
Now, how'd you get into that? Just something
we'll talk about that. That's a longer story, too.
Okay, and I know you preachers do get long-winded.
Yeah, I'm not going to, let's not go into all of that one today. But
okay, but if somebody goes under Jesse Brown.
Just look up Reverend Jesse Brown.
Brown's though.
Just do Reverend Jesse Brown. You'll find me.
Okay.
And I just put out my preaching schedule for now through August, because I'm at some different place, some different church every Sunday. Nearly.
Okay, so you're like a guest speaker at
different
churches?
I am awaiting a permanent position now within the Lutheran church. I'm a Lutheran pastor. Okay. So, and the way we operate is the bishop will submit my name to a congregation, and then I meet with the congregation and we talk it over, and if we feel like God is matching us together, then I become their pastor.
Okay.
But
now, how is Lutheran different than Christian? And I'm
well, there are all kinds of there's all kinds of denominations.
Okay.
Even the Muslims have different groups of Muslims. That's basically
yeah. We'll have to talk about that another show.
Yeah, that's right. We'll talk about that another show.
but are Lutherans? They're Christians. I mean,
well, they're all
part of being Christian.
Yes, you are a Christian is the broad stroke of
Okay.
it. Anybody who professes Jesus Christ is considered a Christian, and I'm saying that because I know that there's some groups who do not necessarily see Jesus Christ as the Son of God or profess Jesus Christ.
Us, Muslims.
And
that's what a lot of people don't understand with Muslims, that we do believe in Jesus Christ, but we believe in him as a messenger of God.
Right.
And we believe in him and we love him.
Right.
And that's why I have a lot of Christian friends. Some of my best friends are Christian. And our common ground is that we both love Jesus Christ.
Right.
So we're not going to fight because we both love Jesus Christ. So why should we fight?
Right. Well, I'm not even saying that we should. I don't.
Exactly.
I believe people ought to believe what they choose to believe,
Right.
and be exposed to those things. But your question to me was, in essence, what's a Christian? What
Right.
makes you Christian?
Right.
And for Christians, the issue is recognizing Jesus Christ as the Son of God.
Right.
And it's a different recognition than, say, what the Muslim do, and other groups. It's not
Right,
they're not the only ones. Some don't see him only as a teacher,
Right.
and others see him only as another prophet.
Right.
And I'm okay, go for it.
Okay.
But that doesn't necessarily make them Christian.
Right.
In that sense.
So Lutherans are basically Christian.
Yes,
that's the
Lutherans
big
are
thing.
Christian.
Okay.
But, the history is that in Protestantism is because of what Martin Luther, who is one of the founders of Lutheranism, brought to the table. That's the start of what we now can look at and see all these denominations that are going on out there. That started way back then in the 1600s.
Okay.
So Lutheranism is kind of that catalyst for that. Okay. The only thing older than that is, of course, the Catholic Church and Muslim. and some of the Eastern religions.
And I'm actually going to come in and hear you one day.
The door is open. Churches are open.
I mean, honestly, I'm never going to change my religion. Because I know who I am, and that's what I believe. But my dad always opened us up to so many other things. So I can come to a church and I can hear your sermon and still be who I am, because that's, to me, still a house of the Lord.
Right.
Okay.
Well, all I do is preach and teach, and I let God do the transforming.
And you've taught me so much in my short relationship with you, and I thank you so much.
I thank you for having me on your show.
And we're not gonna stop there. When you do the Ebenezer thing, you exhume the bikes, you're gonna come back.
We got a lot of work to do, and I hope that even by this show, there'll be somebody who sees what we're talking about and can provide a hand at this. We got to raise a lot of money. We got to do a lot of science work, and
we're going to work on that.
And we're going to work on all of that.
Thank you so much, and thank you guys for tuning into this edition of Salima Speaks. Remember, love yourself, love others, and don't forget to stretch. Thank you. Bye bye.